My name is Lily, and for 4 years, I was the daughter-in-law who broke her back paying the rent and supporting both her husband and her mother-in-law, only to be treated like a freeloader in the end. But they were dead wrong about me. On that cold Christmas Eve, instead of crying and begging, I threw their 2 bags of clothes and my husband's onto the patio and declared with a firm voice, "I pay for this house, so get out, Carol." And you? Was my act one of cruelty, or the just price they had to pay for their boundless greed? I invite you to listen to my story and leave your comments to share your opinion. The atmosphere in the 15th floor conference room was as tense as a violin string. Not even the hum of the air conditioning could break the dead silence as the CEO flipped, page by page, through the year-end report with a deep frown. Suddenly, the shrill sound of a phone shattered the solemn quiet. It was my cell. The screen lit up, displaying 2 words that terrified me: mother-in-law. I felt my face burn as I noticed the dozens of glares from my colleagues and the annoyed look from my boss piercing me like pins. I quickly silenced the ringer, but a familiar anxiety had already taken hold. For these past 4 years, every time payday came, Carol's phone would ring with the punctuality of an alarm clock, never missing by a minute. But today was only December 20th. There was no sign of my paycheck or my Christmas bonus, and I was swamped with work. What was the reason for this call during office hours? "Excuse me, I have to handle an urgent matter," I whispered as I grabbed my phone and rushed out into the hallway, trying to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the room. I had barely pressed the accept button before I could even say a polite hello when Carol's voice exploded on the other end of the line, shrill and piercing like a truck horn, nearly bursting my eardrum. "Lily, where is the money? Do you even plan to give it to me? Jake told me you already received your $2,500 bonus. How come I haven't gotten the bank notification yet?" I leaned against the glass wall, took a deep breath, and tried to suppress the rage and exhaustion rising in my throat. "Carol, I'm in a meeting. Besides, the company hasn't paid out the bonus yet. It's the 20th. We won't get paid until next week. Jake must have heard a rumor and told you wrong." "Don't give me that nonsense." Her voice hissed through the speaker, and I could clearly hear her agitated, angry breathing. "Jake says you're a team lead, that you make a great salary. I bet you have a secret stash of money you're sending to your family, don't you? I know your type, you daughters-in-law. Your husband needs capital for a business, and you, his wife, can't even support him. Why are you hoarding the money so jealously? Do you want your husband to starve?" Hearing that, I felt a sting in my nose. For 4 years, who had paid the rent? Who had bought the groceries? Who had settled her son's gambling debts? Carol knew all of this perfectly well, but she always chose to ignore it. "Carol, I'm telling you the truth. I haven't been paid yet. My entire salary goes to rent and bills because Jake doesn't contribute a single cent." "And now you dare to throw what he does in his face," Carol shouted, interrupting me. "This house is a blessing. Jake had to pull a lot of strings to get such cheap rent. The lease is in his name. You're just a freeloader living off your husband. So act like it. I don't care about your excuses. If I don't see $2,500 in my account this afternoon, don't even bother coming back to this house. My son and I are not going to support a selfish, opportunistic daughter-in-law like you. So, you decide." The relentless, monotone beep told me she had hung up. I stood there alone in the deserted hallway, my phone burning in my hand. I turned and saw my reflection in the large window. A 30-year-old woman with a gaunt face under a thin layer of makeup and purple dark circles from sleepless nights preparing reports and worrying about making ends meet. For 4 years, I had been the sole financial support for this family, enduring every criticism to keep the peace. And now they were treating me like a parasite, threatening to kick me out of the very place I paid for, that I shouldn't come back. Fine. I clenched the phone in my hand. A cold smile formed on my lips, and my gaze lost its usual resignation. "If you don't want me to come back, Carol, I'll be back this afternoon to see who really has to pack their bags and leave this house in the middle of a frigid winter." The December sleet hit the windshield relentlessly, mixing with the monotonous squeak of the wipers and making my heart feel even colder. The chill of a Chicago winter was nothing compared to the desolation that was taking over my soul at that moment. As I drove the usual route home, the memory of my wedding day, 4 years ago, returned with overwhelming clarity, as if it were yesterday. That day, during the reception, Carol had solemnly declared in front of all the guests that the man of the house must control the money for the family to prosper. If the women handle it, they'll just waste it on whims and cosmetics. Back then, deeply in love with Jake and wanting a peaceful family life, I agreed without protest and gave him all my savings. The result? Prosperity was nowhere to be found. Less than a month later, Jake confessed he was in debt. My money had vanished into his endless partying. Arriving at the door, I took off my soaked coat and, holding back a sigh, entered the house. The scene that greeted me turned my stomach with a mix of hunger and self-pity. On the dining room table was a chaos of dirty dishes and the remains of a cold casserole, a layer of white congealed grease on its surface. Beside it, silverware was strewn about haphazardly, along with several empty beer cans. Only a few strands of vegetables and mushy potato pieces were left in the serving dish, with no trace of meat. It was obvious that mother and son had feasted without a thought for me, arriving late from work, having eaten nothing. In the living room, Jake was sprawled across the sofa, one leg propped on the armrest, his eyes glued to his phone screen as he played a game. Every now and then, he'd let out a curse for losing. Carol, beside him, was calmly picking her teeth with a toothpick while watching a soap opera. The TV volume was so loud it drowned out the sound of the rain. Seeing me enter, Jake didn't even flinch. Without looking up from the screen, he tossed out a dry sentence. "You're back. Did you transfer the money to Mom? I need it urgently to invest in a shipment of Christmas decorations with Chris. It's a golden opportunity. I guarantee we'll make 4 times our investment. We're going to live it up this Christmas." I looked at the cold leftovers from dinner, and then at my husband lazing on the sofa. The anger I had suppressed since the afternoon phone call reignited. I dropped my purse on the table with a thud, and my voice came out sharp. "The Christmas shipment, or will it be like the candy deal in October and the clothing one at the start of the year? You always say you need capital, that success is guaranteed, and in the end, where does the money go? I don't see any profits, only messages from creditors every month, and then I'm the one who has to work herself to the bone to pay off your debts." Hearing me, Jake sprang up as if on a spring. He threw his phone forcefully onto the sofa, his face as red as a tomato, and shouted with a swollen neck, "Shut up! Are you calling me a mooch? What does a woman know about business? I'm trying to build a future for this family. If you won't help, at least don't criticize and complain. The money you earn is also household money. I use it for investments, not on other women." The tension in the house was palpable. Carol, seeing her son enraged, spat the toothpick onto the floor, twisted her face in contempt, and added a sentence that left me frozen. "She thinks she's so great because she has a job and earns a few bucks, and that's why she looks down on us, son. What a daughter-in-law, always airing dirty laundry. You should remember that Jake got this house thanks to his connections and his good luck, so that you could have a roof over your head. You're a freeloader. Your husband gives you shelter, and you're not even grateful. Don't think that paying a couple of utility bills gives you the right to raise your voice at us." I stood paralyzed, watching them gang up on me, unable to speak. For 4 years, Jake had lied to his mother, telling her the lease was in his name and that he paid the monthly rent to look good in her eyes. I, to save face for him, had never corrected her. It turned out that my silence and my sacrifice had become the perfect excuse for them to trample on me and humiliate me in this way. The house that I paid for 100%. In their eyes, I was now an ungrateful wretch living for free. It was late at night. Jake's rhythmic, carefree snores mixed with Carol's wheezing breath coming from the other room, making the silence even thicker. I lay motionless, my eyes wide open, staring at the dark ceiling, waiting for them both to be sound asleep. Only then did I sit up stealthily, reach into an old bra, and pull out a tiny key. It was my most precious object, the only thing in that house Carol couldn't touch, and the reason why, often frustrated, she would call me a twisted woman with a secret stash. I silently approached the closet, pushed aside a pile of old clothes, and revealed a small safe hidden in a dark corner. With a dry click, the metal door opened. Inside, there was no gold, no jewels, no expensive trinkets, just a solitary black-covered notebook with worn edges and a messy stack of papers. I turned on my phone's flashlight, and its yellowish light illuminated every detail of my meticulous notes from the last 4 years. October 2020. Payment of Jake's gambling debt, $6,000. January 2021. Hospital expenses for mom's kidney surgery, $4,000. Rent, 48 months, $57,600. Groceries, bills, family gifts, celebrations. Each figure danced before my eyes, cold and relentless. I did a quick calculation. The total sum I had poured into this bottomless pit was close to $120,000. $120,000 in exchange for my youth, my sweat, and my tears, only to be called a freeloader that night. My trembling hands turned the next pages. A crumpled piece of paper fell out. It was a pawn ticket. My Vespa scooter, my only means of transportation to work, had disappeared 3 months ago. Jake had sweetly told me that a friend had borrowed it for a few days' trip. I believed him and resigned myself to the crowded bus for the entire quarter. It turned out he had pawned it for $1,500 to use for a card game. The deadline to reclaim it had long passed. With the accumulated interest, that scooter would surely never be mine again. A message notification on my phone chimed softly, but it was enough to make me jump. I quickly placed the phone face down on the mattress and glanced at Jake, who was still sleeping like a log. I turned the screen on. A notification from the bank. Your account has received a deposit of $2,750, corresponding to your salary and Christmas bonus. Out of habit, for these past years, at this very moment, I would have transferred $1,200 to the joint account, whose card Jake managed to keep up appearances with his mother. My finger hovered over the transfer button. 1 second, 2, 3. The image of the cold dinner from that night and Carol's disdainful look appeared vividly in my mind. I bit my lip, turned off the screen, and set the phone aside. No, not one more cent. My foolishness and my patience had reached their limit. Suddenly, Jake's phone, which was charging on the nightstand, lit up. A new message. In the dim light, the screen's glow reflected on his sleeping face, so peaceful it was hateful. Curiosity got the better of me. I leaned over and read the short message from an unsaved, unknown number displayed on the lock screen. Jake, what's up with the $2,500? We can't wait until tomorrow afternoon. Don't make us come to your house and make a scene. That would be a shame. A chill ran down my spine. Come to your house. That wasn't the tone of a business partner. It was, without a doubt, the tone of loan sharks, of debt collectors. It turned out that the $2,500 that mother and son had demanded from me that afternoon wasn't for any investment, but to cover the hole of gambling debts Jake had just dug. And they dared to insult me, to threaten to kick me out, just so I would work myself to death to pay for their vices. I looked at the man sleeping beside me, then at the notebook full of debts I had taken on for him. A mix of disgust and determination took over me. Very well. You want to play dirty? I'll play too, but this time I'll be the one dealing the cards. The next morning, as soon as the alarm went off, I jumped out of bed after a sleepless night discovering terrible secrets. My mind, instead of being exhausted, was strangely clear. I put on my office suit, a bit of red lipstick to brighten my pale face, and took a deep breath before leaving the bedroom. The atmosphere in the house was so tense you could cut it with a knife. At the dining table, Carol was already sitting with a sour face, staring at me with her piercing, hostile eyes. Jake, next to her, was hiding his face with an old newspaper, but his legs were trembling. His sunken, dark-ringed eyes darted glances at me. The loan shark's message from last night surely hadn't let him sleep. Out of habit, for these past 4 years, every morning before going to work, I would take $25 from my wallet and leave it on the table for Carol to buy groceries. She always complained that her legs were weak and she couldn't go to distant markets, so she shopped at the neighborhood supermarket, where everything was more expensive. So that money barely covered lunch and dinner for the two of them. Casually, I picked up my purse, walked past the table, and headed for the door without making the slightest move to take out my wallet. Seeing me about to leave, Carol slammed her hand on the table. "Stop right there. Where are you going? And the money for today's groceries? Do you plan to let us starve?" "I wanted to buy a free-range chicken today to make some broth for Jake, to help him regain his strength. He's been working and thinking so much lately. He's gotten so thin." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob, turned around, and forced a smile, my voice soft but sharp. "Oh, Carol, there are still a dozen eggs and some green beans I bought the day before yesterday in the fridge. You can make some boiled eggs to get by. The company is doing poorly this month, and they haven't given me an advance on my salary yet. I don't have a single dollar on me." That same old story about being poor again. Carol glared at me, jumped to her feet, and pointed a finger at me. "You earn a fortune, and you say you don't have money for groceries. Do you think I'm an idiot? I don't know how you'll manage, but your husband is the one who brings home the bacon, and he needs to eat well to have strength. Give me the money right now." I glanced at Jake. Hearing his mother call him the one who brings home the bacon, he turned pale as wax and lowered his head, his forehead beaded with sweat. He knew perfectly well he didn't even have enough for a coffee in his pocket, let alone a free-range chicken. I shrugged, my tone so indifferent that even I was surprised by my own audacity. "It's the truth, Carol. If you don't believe me, I can't do anything about it." "Hey, why don't you ask Jake for an advance? He's involved in a very big business deal, something about Christmas decorations that's going to bring in a lot of profit. I'm sure he wouldn't mind sparing a few dollars to buy you a chicken, right?" Hearing about the Christmas decoration business, Jake flinched as if he'd been hit by an electric shock and stammered incoherently. Yeah, well, it's just that I've put all the money into the merchandise. I don't have any cash left." Carol, seeing her son hesitate, became even more furious and turned to unleash all her anger on me. "What kind of woman are you? Your husband is taking care of important matters, and you should be supporting him from home over a few miserable dollars, and you're already passing the buck to him. A useless, stingy woman like you is only good for being thrown to the dogs." Rage washed over me, but this time I didn't let it consume me. I looked Carol straight in the eye and pronounced each word with resounding clarity, my voice echoing in the small living room. "That's funny, Carol. Just yesterday you were saying this house belonged to Jake, that it was a blessing he had secured. Well then, the owner of the house should be responsible for feeding his own mother, right? I'm just a freeloader. I wouldn't dare steal that credit from him." With that, I turned around, opened the door, walked out, and slammed it shut. Through the wood, I could hear Carol's screams and insults. "You dare to talk back to me? Ill-mannered girl. Get back here right now." I got my scooter from the entryway, my hands still trembling with a mix of nervousness and euphoria. For the first time in 4 years of bowing my head, I had dared to stand up to her irrationality. A sense of satisfaction coursed through my body as I remembered Jake's panicked face when I suggested he pay. Where was he going to get the money, with creditors breathing down his neck? This battle had just begun, and I wouldn't stop until I got back everything that was mine. Leaving the alley, my heart still pounding from my recent rebellion, I didn't head straight to the office as usual. Instead, I turned toward the corner booth diner, hidden in the shade of a century-old tree a few hundred feet from home. It was the headquarters of Mr. Henderson, the owner of the apartment we had been living in for 4 years. Mr. Henderson, a man over 65 and a retired Army veteran, was extremely principled and hated lies and deceit. He liked me because he saw me working from dawn to dusk and I was clean and polite, but he couldn't stand Jake for his boastful nature and his habit of throwing loud parties with his friends. I entered the diner and saw Mr. Henderson sitting formally with a cup of coffee and a newspaper in his hand, squinting through his reading glasses. I took a deep breath to calm myself and approached, gently placing a bottle of Napa Cabernet, a special reserve, on the table. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson. Back from your morning walk already? I brought you a bottle of good wine to toast the holidays in advance." Mr. Henderson looked up and, seeing me, folded his newspaper. His gaze softened slightly, but remained serious. "Lily, what a surprise! Have a seat. I was just thinking of calling you." I gently pulled out a chair and sat across from him with a knot in my stomach. "Is something wrong, Mr. Henderson?" Mr. Henderson sighed, drumming his fingers on the wooden table. "Today is December 20th. The lease on your apartment expires on the 25th, right on Christmas Eve. To be honest, I'm thinking of taking the place back and not renting it out again." I felt my heart stop. If he took the apartment back now, my plan would fall apart. I quickly asked, "Why, Mr. Henderson? We've always paid the rent on time. We've never been a day late." "I have no complaints with you," Mr. Henderson said, waving his hand with a sterner tone. "But I'm fed up with your husband. Lately, he's been bringing his buddies over all the time to drink and make a racket with karaoke. The neighbors have complained to me several times. I'm a decent person, and I can't tolerate that kind of tenant. Besides, I've heard rumors that he's into some debts. I don't want lowlifes coming around and disturbing my property." Mr. Henderson's words were like a bucket of cold water, but at the same time, they confirmed all my suspicions about Jake. Not only was he a lazy bum, but he was turning the house I paid for into a den of vice. But in this misfortune, I found an opportunity. Mr. Henderson's disdain for Jake was my greatest advantage at that moment. I looked him directly in the eye, my voice sincere but firm. "Mr. Henderson, I understand your concern. The truth is, for these 4 years, I have been the one who transferred the rent money to you every month. Jake hasn't paid a single cent. I am the first person interested in taking care of that house." I paused, watching his reaction, and then played my card. "I wanted to ask if you would let me renew the lease for another year. I will pay you 6 months in advance right now to put your mind at ease. But I have one condition, and I'd like your help." Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow, curious. "What condition? Go on, tell me." I took the lease agreement I had drafted the night before from my purse and slid it across the table to him. "I want to sign a new contract, but the sole tenant will be me, Lily Garcia, and I want to add a special clause in the rights and obligations section." Mr. Henderson picked up the paper and read aloud the line I had underlined. Clause 5.3, the tenant, Miss Lily Garcia, shall have the exclusive authority to decide on the occupancy of any individual in the leased dwelling, without the express consent, whether verbal or written, of the tenant. Any person, including family members, who stays in the dwelling for a period exceeding 24 hours shall be considered an illegal occupant, and the landlord, Mr. Henderson, agrees to assist the tenant in the eviction process. When he finished reading, Mr. Henderson took off his glasses and looked at me intently, his gaze full of meaning. "Lily, are you serious about this? Are you planning to kick them out onto the street?" I pressed my lips together, holding back the bitterness rising in my throat. "I've put up with too much, Mr. Henderson. If they don't consider me family, I have no obligation to keep them in a house that I pay for with my sweat and tears. I just want to protect myself." Mr. Henderson was silent for a long moment, then nodded, took a fountain pen from his shirt pocket, and said, "All right, I trust you. But I don't trust that lazy parasite one bit. I support hard-working, honest people like you. I'll sign." Seeing Mr. Henderson's decisive signature on the contract, I felt as if a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I held that fragile but powerful piece of paper. I folded it carefully and put it in my purse. It wasn't just a lease agreement. It was the sword of justice I had been sharpening all night. Now, the power of life and death in that house was completely in my hands. "Carol, Jake, just you wait. This Christmas will be a memory you'll never forget." After securing my talisman, the new lease agreement from Mr. Henderson, I arrived at the office as the clock was striking noon. After a morning of running around, my stomach was growling with hunger, but my mind was clearer than ever. I skipped lunch. I went straight to find Sarah, my best friend from college, who now worked in the company's legal department, and pulled her into a quiet corner of the balcony. I showed her the screenshot of the loan shark's message I had taken from Jake's phone while he was sleeping. Sarah adjusted her glasses and, her fingers flying across her laptop, searched for information through her contacts. 15 minutes later, she turned to me with a serious face. "Lily, I've checked. The number that texted your husband doesn't belong to any business partner. It's the phone of a group of loan sharks operating under the guise of a financial company, mainly on the South Side. They're known for being very aggressive when collecting their debts." A shiver ran down my spine. "Loan sharks." Sarah nodded, lowering her voice. "Remember the last World Cup? I bet your husband, Jake, got into sports betting and lost everything. My contacts in the police told me this group is putting a lot of pressure on collecting debts before the year ends. That $2,500 is probably just the interest or a small part of the principal because gambling debts grow at a dizzying pace. Connecting the dots, everything fit together in a horrifying way. The nights Jake stayed up watching games, screaming like a madman, followed by days of bad moods and unprovoked anger, the sale of my Vespa, and to top it off, the sham of the Christmas decoration shipment. There was no business opportunity. Mother and son were pressuring me to hand over the money, not to invest it, but to save Jake's skin from a visit from thugs. "You have to cut him off, Lily," Sarah told me, squeezing my hand with concern. "Getting involved with those people is hell. They don't just harass you for the money, they terrorize you psychologically. If they come to make a scene at the office, you could lose your job and your reputation. Don't let him drag you down with him." Sarah's warning was the final sign I needed to dispel any remaining doubts. I nodded, my heart completely cold. Just then, my phone vibrated in my purse. It was a message from Jake. I opened it and almost dropped the phone from the nausea that rose in my throat. "Honey, come home soon this afternoon. Mom is at the market buying ingredients to make those ribs and BBQ sauce you love so much. We'll be waiting for you for a family dinner. I love you so much." My wife works so hard for her husband. I read and reread the message. The words, "honey" and "I love you" sounded incredibly false and ironic. How long had it been since he'd said anything like that to me? A year, 2, or never since we got married. He usually called me by my name, or simply you. When he was angry, it was a hey or a look, treating me like a stranger. And now, cornered by creditors, with the noose of debt tightening around his neck, he put on the mask of the perfect, loving husband just to get money out of me. That sudden, cloying change in attitude wasn't remorse. It was the clearest sign of his desperation. He was terrified and needed me as a shield, as an ATM to get out of trouble. I smiled bitterly, but with pride. "Love me? Appreciate me? No, you just want my wallet. Do you think some ribs and a few cheap, sweet words can fool me again? I'm sorry, but that wallet is now closed for good." I put my phone away and, looking at Sarah, said with a determination that lit a flame in my eyes, "I know what I have to do. Tonight, I'll be home early to give that family an early Christmas present they will never forget." The moment I put the key in the lock, the delicious aroma of ribs in BBQ sauce filled the hallway, eclipsing the usual musty smell of the old house. As I walked into the living room, I was stunned for a moment, as if I had entered the wrong apartment. The mess of beer cans, dirty clothes, and the stuffy air from the morning had vanished. In its place, the floor shone clean, and the furniture was perfectly arranged. On the table, a hot dinner was steaming, freshly served. Carol came out of the kitchen with a platter of sautéed vegetables. Seeing me, she gave me a radiant smile with a kind look I had rarely seen in the 4 years I had been her daughter-in-law. "You're home. Wash your hands and sit down for dinner while it's hot. I went to the market early today and found some amazing ribs. I've prepared all your favorite dishes." Jake also rushed out of the bedroom and, in a syrupy voice, took my purse from my hand. "Are you tired from work, honey? Let me put your purse away for you. Sit down and rest a bit." This sudden kindness gave me goosebumps. If it weren't for the conversation with Sarah and the photo of the loan shark's message, I might have softened and believed that this family was finally starting to value me. But now, watching this clumsy performance of a happy family, I only felt nausea. They were trying to buy Jake's safety with a little cheap affection. Dinner proceeded in an atmosphere of warmth so false it was uncomfortable. Carol kept putting the best, meatiest ribs on my plate while whispering to me, "Eat up, dear, eat a lot to get your strength back." This morning I was a little on edge and let a few harsh words slip, but it's only because I worry about the future of this house. You're young, don't hold a grudge against an old woman. Jake, beside me, would occasionally massage my back and whisper in my ear, "Honey, see if you can get the $2,500. Okay? I swear on my honor that this business is 100% safe. If it goes well, I'll buy you a new car so you can get to work comfortably, and in the summer, we'll take a trip to Florida with Mom to make up for all your hard work." The promise of a car and a trip sounded hollow, an idyllic vision exactly like the ones he painted when he was courting me. I took a sip of water to swallow the contempt rising in my throat. I put my plate down on the table, looked up at Jake, and, pretending to consider it, said, "That sounds tempting, but what exactly are you investing in? What company is it? What merchandise exactly? Can you show me the contract or the invoices? Money is hard to earn, and I need to see things clearly before I make a transfer." My question was a direct hit to his weak spot. The smile froze on his lips, and his eyes darted nervously, avoiding my gaze. He stammered, his face completely red. "Well, it's a deal between trusted friends. Paperwork just complicates things. As soon as the merchandise arrives, we sell it, and that's it. Cash in hand." Seeing her son cornered, Carol immediately intervened. The friendly smile from before vanished. She dropped her silverware on the table with a clatter, and her tone became harsh again. "Who do you think you are? Your husband and wife, and you're asking him for papers and invoices as if he were a stranger. He's your husband. He's handling important business, and you have to trust him. If you keep making these demands, we'll never get ahead. If you don't give him the money now, it means you want him to fail." The mask had finally fallen. My last shred of patience evaporated with my mother-in-law's hypocritical attitude. At this point, I had no reason to keep pretending. I set my silverware down on the table with a sharp click that echoed in the silence. I jumped to my feet and stared at both of them. In a clear voice, I declared, "I'm going to be direct, so you can save the theatrics. I'm not giving you a single cent, and I know perfectly well that Jake needs that $2,500 to pay off a debt to some thugs for losing at betting, not for any business. Don't try to fool me ever again." When I finished speaking, the air in the dining room became unbreathable, as if all the oxygen had vanished. Carol glared at me. Her face, previously red with anger, turned a purplish shade, and then, without warning, she swept the platter of hot ribs off the table with her arm. It crashed to the floor with a deafening shatter. The sound of the breaking ceramic was ear-splitting. Pieces flew everywhere, and the sauce splattered across the floor and my pants. Jake jumped and shrank into a corner, his face pale, but I remained motionless like a statue, coldly watching my crazed mother-in-law. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" Carol screamed, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "You dare to spy on your husband? You venomous snake. I suspected you, but I never imagined you were capable of something so low. So what if you earn the money? From the moment you set foot in this house as my daughter-in-law, your money is also this family's money. I am your mother-in-law, and if I tell you to give it to me, you give it to me. No backtalk." She paced the room like a caged beast, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Jake, seeing his mother lose control, rushed to her side. As he patted her back, he turned to me with a tone that mixed pleading and threat. "Lily, are you crazy? Why are you provoking my mother? Don't you know she has high blood pressure? Apologize to her right now and give me the money. It's $2,500. Give it to me, and I'll fix all of this, and we'll pretend this never happened. Stop being so selfish." I looked at Jake with a contempt that choked me. He still dared to call me selfish. I smiled bitterly and pushed away his hand that was trying to land on my shoulder. "Shut up! I have no obligation to break my back to pay for your gambling debts. Not 2,000, not 200,000. I won't give you anything. What happens to you from now on is your problem. Don't think you can drag me down with you. How dare you speak to your husband like that? You insolent girl!" Carol, unable to contain herself any longer, lunged at me like a whirlwind, her arm raised to slap me. But she was mistaken. I was no longer the submissive, long-suffering Lily of 4 years ago. With the speed of a lightning bolt, I raised my hand and caught her wrist in midair, squeezing tightly. Carol was stunned, trying unsuccessfully to free herself, her eyes wide with shock, looking at me as if I were a stranger. "Don't you ever lay a hand on me again," I said through gritted teeth, my sharp gaze piercing her soul. "I'm not your punching bag. The time when I let you intimidate me is over. If you touch me, I'll call the police and report you for assault." I pushed her hard, sending her stumbling back until she almost fell against the table. She let out a groan, clutching her chest, her face contorted with rage and helplessness. Seeing that she couldn't force me, she resorted to her last card, screaming in a shrill voice, "Fine, you're so smart. You think you're so great because you have some money, and you dare to stand up to your mother-in-law. We don't want a brazen daughter-in-law like you in this house. If you don't give us the money, get out. Get out of my house right now. I'll find Jake another wife from a good family, 1,000 times richer than you, so you can die of envy." Her words echoed in the chaotic room. I stood still for a second, not out of fear or pain, but from a strange sense of relief. She had finally said the phrase I had been patiently waiting for days. Now she had served it to me on a silver platter. Carol's screams still echoed in the living room, but I ignored them. I went into our bedroom and locked the door. The flimsy wood separated me from the chaos outside, but it gave me the space and calm I needed to prepare the final act. I leaned against the door, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. In my mind, the image of the new lease agreement with Miss Starr, Henderson's signature appeared like a protective shield. I took out my phone and called Sarah. As soon as she answered, I said in a low but firm voice, "Sarah, I've decided. Tomorrow, December 24th, on Christmas Eve, I'm doing it. This has gone too far. I can't take it anymore." Sarah, on the other end, seemed to sense the tension in my voice and responded quickly. "Okay, stick to the plan. I have the legal documents ready. If anything gets complicated, call me, and I'll be there immediately." After hanging up, I sprang into action. I pulled a large suitcase from the top of the closet and opened it on the floor. Quickly but carefully, I began to pack my most valuable items. The gold jewelry my parents gave me at the wedding, my savings passbook, my documents, and my most expensive clothes. I arranged everything neatly in the suitcase, covering it with old clothes to conceal it. In the closet, I left some old, worn-out loungewear and a couple of outdated office suits. I looked at the closet, which seemed full despite being half empty thanks to my cunning, and smiled bitterly. It was a psychological trap. They would think I still felt something for this house, that I was still the same old fool, and they would let their guard down. When I finished, I hid the suitcase under the bed and covered it with the bedspread. Then I picked up my phone and sent a message to Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, tomorrow evening around 7, could you stop by the house? I'll need you as a witness when I reclaim the property. Thank you very much." As soon as I sent it, the double blue check appeared. Mr. Henderson replied with 2 simple words, "I'll be there." His support gave me even more strength. Outside, Carol's insults had ceased, replaced by heavy footsteps and Jake's furious voice. He started pounding on the door, making it tremble. "Open the door, you witch. What are you doing hiding in there? Where did you put the money? Give it to me right now, or I'll break down the door." I sat motionless on the bed, clutching my phone, my cold gaze fixed on the vibrating door. I knew Jake was all bark and no bite, that he wouldn't dare break it down. His pride prevented him from making a scene that would alert the neighbors, or worse, his creditors. But I also knew his patience had run out. The cornered beast was about to show its claws, and I, the patient hunter, had already set my trap. Tomorrow, the curtain would fall on this farce. On the morning of December 24th, Chicago awoke to a bitter cold. A polar vortex arrived just in time for Christmas Eve, inviting everyone to stay snuggled under the blankets. But for me, the cold outside was nothing compared to the coldness in my heart from living with those hypocrites. I got up early, did my makeup carefully, and put on a vibrant red coat like a silent declaration of war. Before leaving for work, I purposely left a spare set of keys on the shoe rack, a spot so visible that Carol's eagle eyes wouldn't miss them. They were the keys to the old particle board closet in the bedroom, where she always suspected I kept my personal treasure. At the office, I sat at my desk, but my mind was at home. At 9 a.m. sharp, the time Carol would assume I was deep in meetings, I opened the security camera app on my phone. The micro camera I had secretly installed the previous afternoon, hidden behind a teddy bear on top of the closet, was transmitting clear images of my bedroom. Just as I had predicted, the show began. On my phone screen, my bedroom door slowly opened. Carol peeked her head in, looking both ways like a thief, and then signaled for Jake to enter. In her hand, she held the set of keys I had forgotten, her face beaming with triumph. "Quick, son, luck is on our side." "That stupid girl left the keys. I'm sure she hides the money in this closet. She always keeps it locked up tight. Open it. Take the $2,500 to pay the debt, and then we'll kick her out once and for all." Jake, trembling, took the keys. Despite the cold, sweat beaded on his forehead. He clumsily inserted the key into the lock. Click! The sound of the latch opening was clearly audible through my phone's speaker. The closet door swung open, and mother and son pounced on the contents, rummaging through and throwing the old clothes I had purposefully left onto the floor. "Here it is. I knew it," Carol exclaimed triumphantly, pulling a thick brown envelope sealed with tape from the back of the closet. She tore it open eagerly, expecting to find a wad of cash, but the smile vanished from her face in an instant. What fell from the envelope wasn't money, but a single printed sheet of paper. Jake picked it up and read it. The color drained from his face, and his hands trembled so much that the paper fell to the floor. It was a copy of the detailed statement of all his gambling debts, which I had obtained thanks to Sarah. Below it, a sentence I had printed in large red letters. "Next time, pay your own debts. Take responsibility for your actions." "What is this? That witch is mocking us!" Carol roared, her voice breaking with rage and disappointment. She crumpled the paper, threw it on the floor, and, like a trapped animal, unleashed her fury on my clothes. She grabbed several of my shirts and threw them to the ground, stomping on them while grinding her teeth and cursing. Jake stood paralyzed, leaning against the closet, his face gray as he realized his secret was exposed. I, sitting in my air-conditioned office, smiled disdainfully as I watched the pathetic scene on my phone. With a soft tap, I saved the video. That 5-minute clip was irrefutable proof of the invasion of my privacy, the rummaging through my belongings, and the destruction of my property by mother and son. Now, I not only had reason on my side, but also morality and the law, to kick them out of my life without anyone being able to accuse me of being a bad daughter-in-law or a cruel wife. I closed the app, took out my bright red lipstick, and carefully reapplied it. In the mirror, the image of the weak, submissive woman from before had vanished, replaced by a cunning, cold, and powerful Lily. I looked at the clock and whispered to myself, "All right, time to go home and celebrate Christmas Eve. The real party is about to begin." At 6 p.m., as the streetlights began to illuminate the alley, I arrived home. Before I even turned off the scooter's engine, Carol's screams and insults were already audible from the entrance, so shrill that several neighbors were peeking out to see what was happening. "Witch, where have you been? Get back here right now, you miserable liar." I took a deep breath, fighting back nausea, and calmly walked into the courtyard. As I stepped into the living room, I was met with a scene of devastation. The bedroom closet door was wide open, and all my clothes, books, and personal belongings were scattered across the floor. My white shirts, which I ironed so carefully, were crumpled and covered in dirty footprints. Carol was squatting in the middle of the mess, beating the floor with a hanger, as if venting her frustration on a doll. Seeing me enter, she jumped up and lunged toward me, pointing a trembling finger. "Ah! You finally show your face, you wretch! Where did you hide the money? I've turned this whole house upside down and haven't found a single cent. Did you spend it with some lover, or did you send it to your parents?" I looked at her and then at Jake, who was huddled in a corner of the sofa with his head down. I smiled disdainfully, my voice icy. "You rummaged through my things and wrecked the house just to look for money? What do you want my money for, Carol? To pay off your wonderful son's gambling debts? Or to support a grown man who can't even earn a living?" My words were the last straw, a direct attack on the pride and humiliation of both of them. Jake, cornered, exploded in rage. He roared like a wild animal and lunged at me, his arm raised to slap me. "Shut your mouth. You're disrespecting my mother. I'm going to kill you." But I had already anticipated it. I took a step back, dodging his blow by a hair's breadth. Instantly, I pulled out my phone, already recording, and held it up in front of his face, my voice resonating with firmness. "Go ahead, touch me. If you lay a single finger on me, I'll call the police right now for domestic violence and for theft." The bedroom camera recorded the entire scene this morning when you and your mother forced open the closet and went through my things. If you want to go to court or to jail, that's your decision." Jake froze, his arm still raised as if he'd been turned to stone. He glared at me, then at the phone in my hand. His fury vanished, replaced by absolute panic. He knew I wasn't joking. With the evidence in hand, he couldn't deny it. Carol, seeing her son cowed, became even more enraged. She stomped her foot and screamed, her voice sharper than the wind blowing outside. "You set us up, you snake! Get out! Get out of my house right now! I don't want a sneaky daughter-in-law who spies, records, and reports her own husband and mother-in-law. Get out of my sight." Her order of expulsion was deafening, but to me, it was the sweetest melody. She herself was finally kicking me out, just as I had planned. I looked at her, and my smile grew even wider, the smile of a victor about to witness the final act. Carol's shriek to get out of her sight still rang in my ears, but I felt neither fear nor hesitation. I stood up straight, smoothed my blouse, and looked at her with an icy calm. "You're kicking me out, Carol? All right. But before I go, let's clear things up and see who really needs to pack their bags and leave this house." With that, I calmly opened my purse and took out a folded sheet of paper. I held it up in front of them and read in a loud, clear voice, "Residential Lease Agreement. Landlord, Mr. Michael Henderson. Tenant, Miss Lily Garcia. Lease term, 12 months. Effective today, the 24th of December 2024. Carol's jaw dropped, her eyes as wide as saucers. Stammering, she pointed at the paper. "You're lying. You're making it up. Jake rented this house. The lease is in his name, and he pays faithfully every month. Where did you get that scrap of paper to threaten me with?" Just then, the patio door opened. Mr. Henderson, accompanied by 2 neighbors, entered with a firm stride. He was dressed in his old, impeccably ironed military uniform, his face serious, his voice resonating with authority. "You are mistaken, ma'am. Lily is not lying. I was the one who signed that contract with her." Jake, upon seeing Mr. Henderson, turned white as a sheet and backed away, hiding behind his mother. Mr. Henderson walked into the living room and looked Carol straight in the eye, his voice severe. "You think your son is a man of substance? You're wrong. For 4 years, it has been Lily who transferred the rent to me every month, without missing a cent, without being a day late. Your dear son has not paid me a single dollar. The old lease, in both their names, expired yesterday. Today, I signed a new one, solely with Lily. Now this house is hers, and she has every right to use it as she pleases." Hearing this, Carol looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She turned to Jake with a look of disbelief and disappointment. "Jake, is it true? Say something. You said you were taking care of everything." Jake hung his head, not daring to say a word. His silence was the bitterest answer. Without giving them time to react, I went to the guest room where they were staying. From under the bed, I pulled out 2 enormous black trash bags I had prepared. Inside was all their clothing and belongings. I dragged the heavy bags to the living room and, with all my strength, threw them onto the patio. Thump, thump. The bags landed on the damp ground, and a few old clothes spilled out. I stood in the doorway, pointed outside, and said in a cold, determined voice, "Please, leave my house now. As of this moment, you have no right to remain here. I rent this house, and I pay for it. I will not support ungrateful parasites." Outside, the drizzle had intensified. The icy wind seeped through the cracks. The 2 black bags lay on the patio like abandoned trash. Carol and Jake stood there, shivering from the cold, their faces ashen, staring at me as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. The tables had turned. The one who had been scorned and trampled now held the power, and those who had been arrogant and abusive were now 2 pathetic vagrants. A wave of satisfaction washed over me, warming me on that frigid night. Seeing that the situation had completely turned and she had nothing to cling to, Carol resorted to playing the victim. She dropped to her knees on the wet patio floor and, beating her thighs, lifted her face to the sky and began to wail. "Oh, neighbors, come and see how my daughter-in-law is throwing her elderly mother-in-law out onto the street on a night like this. Good heavens, is there no justice? I have raised a snake in my own home. She has stolen my house, and now she's throwing my son and me out. Oh, dear God, what a tragedy." Her theatrical laments echoed through the neighborhood, but the response was not the compassion she expected, but disapproving glares and whispers from the observing neighbors. Mrs. Davis, the head of the homeowners association who was nearby, clucked her tongue and said with disdain, "Oh, please, ma'am, stop the theatrics. It's embarrassing. In this neighborhood, we all know you tried to rob your daughter-in-law and the camera caught you. Lily is a saint for having put up with you for so many years. When you live without decency and with so much greed, you eventually get what you deserve." Exposed publicly, Jake turned red with rage and shame. He tried to force his way into the house to salvage what little pride he had left. "Get out of the way. This is my house, and I'll come in whenever I want." But Mr. Henderson stood in his way, his small but firm body like an oak tree. He glared at him and, pointing a finger, warned in a thundering voice, "You try to cross that threshold and see what happens. I've already said it. The lease is in Lily's name. This is her house. If you enter, I'll call the police, and you'll be arrested for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Feel like spending Christmas Eve in a holding cell?" Jake stopped in his tracks, cowed by Mr. Henderson's firmness. He knew the retired military man wasn't joking. He looked at the neighbors pointing at him, and then at me, standing with my arms crossed, impassive. His bravado had evaporated. Leaning against the doorframe, I looked at those two pathetic beings without a shred of compassion. I reached into my coat pocket, took out a $20 bill, crumpled it slightly, and threw it on the ground at Jake's feet. "The $2,500 I worked for, don't even dream of it. But for the 4 years we were husband and wife, I'm giving you this $20 handout so you can get a taxi to a motel and spend the night. Take it and get out of my sight. Don't make me call security to drag you away, which would be even more humiliating." The bill landed on the wet ground, a final insult to their pride. Carol stopped crying and looked at me with hatred and disbelief. Jake looked at the bill, then at his mother shivering from the cold. His false pride finally gave way to hunger, cold, and fear. He bent down, picked up the bill, and stuffed it in his pocket. With his other hand, he grabbed the 2 plastic bags and pulled his mother along, hissing through his teeth, "Let's go, Mom. Aren't you embarrassed they're still insulting us? Let's go." Their stooped figures walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the street, as bleak as their future. I watched them go one last time. I took a deep breath of the cold, pure night air and went inside. Click, the sound of the deadbolt locking echoed loudly, an echo of my own liberation. Closing a chapter of bitterness and opening a new page of freedom. It was over. The 4-year nightmare had ended. Once the door was closed, an unusual silence filled the house, a silence I hadn't experienced in 4 years. Without Carol's complaints or Jake's shouts, only the soft whistle of the wind and the ticking of the clock remained. I sighed in relief and sank onto the sofa. I poured myself a glass of water and held it in my hands, feeling its warmth. The feeling of being the master of my own space was incredibly sweet. But the peace was short-lived. My phone began to vibrate again. It was Jake. This time, however, seeing his name, I felt not fear, but a mix of satisfaction and contempt. The tables had turned. I was in control. I took a sip of water before looking at the flood of messages. The first was from Carol's number. Her tone had changed drastically. "Daughter, Lily, I'm old, and it's so cold out here. My bones ache. Please let me in. I know I was wrong. I apologize. I swear I will never yell at you again. You are the best daughter-in-law in the world. Don't let me freeze to death." I read the message and smiled. Now that she felt the cold, she remembered to apologize. Too late. Without replying, I blocked her number. Then Jake's message appeared, still with his arrogant tone. "Lily, don't be so cruel. You have no heart. Where do you expect us to go now? No motel will take us at this hour. Open the door, or you'll regret it." I laughed out loud at his naivety. I called him back, my voice as cold as steel. "Hello. You're asking me where to go? That's your problem. Just like for 4 years, this house and its rent have been my problem. You have arms and legs, figure it out. I'm not your mother or your babysitter." On the other end of the line, I could only hear the wind and the chattering of his teeth. He mumbled something unintelligible and hung up. I opened our chat and sent him a PDF file that Sarah had prepared for me. The unilateral divorce petition, already signed by me. "Sign it," I wrote in a final message. "When you return it to me signed, I'll consider giving you back some clean clothes. If not, you can spend the winter with those trash bags." After sending the message, I set my phone aside. I knew he had no other choice. Ding-dong. The bells of the nearby church rang out, announcing that Christmas Eve had arrived. I got up, went to the window, and looked at the starry sky. A new Christmas, filled with the warmth of freedom. The next morning, the Christmas sun streamed through the window. I woke up in absolute silence. No more clattering dishes, no shouting, no depressing presence of my ex-husband. The house was finally mine, clean, tidy, and peaceful. Next to the small Christmas tree I had bought, a cup of coffee was steaming. The doorbell rang. It was Sarah, loaded with bags and with a huge grin. "Merry Christmas, Golden Bachelorette." I brought good wine and roasted chicken. We had a small party in the living room, the same place that had been a battlefield just 24 hours earlier. We toasted and laughed. Suddenly, Sarah got a message. She looked at me slyly. "Breaking news. The lady at the newsstand just told me she saw Jake surrounded by some tattooed guys at the corner bar. Looks like they scared him good. He was crying and calling his parents to sell some land to pay his debt. Want to go watch the show?" I took a sip of wine. My heart was calm. His problems, his debts, his pathetic family were no longer part of my life. "Let him figure it out," I replied. "That's the price he has to pay. I don't care anymore." I stepped out onto the balcony and breathed in the fresh air of freedom. The $2,500 bonus was lost. With it, I had bought my peace, my dignity, and the right to live with my head held high. It was a small price to pay for a new life. I closed the balcony door, leaving the cold outside, and stayed with the warmth of friendship and joy in my little home. For a woman with money, a home, and freedom, every day is a Merry Christmas. This story shows that a woman only finds peace when she is financially independent and defends her self-esteem. Respect in a family must be mutual, not blind submission. On this Christmas Eve, I chose my own peace to start a brighter tomorrow. If you liked this story, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment with a 1 if you identify with Lily, or a 2 if you think something could have been different.